Is Mama Pao one of the messiest judges in all of the franchise? She just might be. I find myself constantly impressed with the way that Drag Race Philippines manages to juggle the television aspect of Drag Race and the competition side of RuPaul's Drag Race. Pao, more than any other host that I've watched so far, is really plugged into what is happening in the workroom and in the confessionals, what the girls are saying to each other, and airs out those concerns by manually bringing them up either in the workroom or on the main stage so that the tension can be either resolved quickly or can explode into something else. Whereas I feel like especially RuPaul pretends that she doesn't know what's going on. And maybe some of these hosts have no idea what's happening in the room, but I highly doubt that in a televised reality show, they are not clued in at least a little bit as to what some of the storylines will be for the week so that they know how to deliberate and make sure to set up what the audience is supposed to see based off of what's going on in the producer's office. We'll see so often that two girls are fighting in the workroom and magically they both end up in the bottom. Or one of them ends up winning the challenge to bolster their storyline and the person they were fighting with, the one that we're not supposed to like as the audience, is in the bottom and we see one person's star rise while the other is fall. Sometimes they'll even come up with completely bogus critiques in order to solidify two queens being in the bottom in order to lip sync battle. And I love the way that Mama Pao manages to bring that drama onto the main stage. It's focused messiness, and I'm so here for it. This week's challenge was thoroughly messy, and I think I loved the drama, but also it made me feel kind of bad for those queens who are not here for the mess, they're here for the competition, or they're here for a redemption. And the duality of the Filipina queens and the international queens is like night and day. The international queens lack a cohesion and harmony that the Filipina queens simply just are not struggling with. Have you ever watched one of those videos of those 10,000 pound weight machines that crush a toy and all of the remnants go squishing out underneath the weight? This season is sort of like that. The Filipina queens are a force, and the international queens are getting squashed by them. Not only by their competition presence, but by their TV presence. Because the Filipina queens are always on to a 10. They understand that they're making a show, and they know how to punch up their characters, where some of these international queens just did not have enough time on their original seasons. I think Siam is putting on just enough of a persona that maybe she'll stand out among some of these queens. And I do think a lot of the response online is that people are responding well to her energy. Ivory made a solid point in the late part of this episode that her original elimination still haunts her to this day. And I can imagine that if you're someone who went out in the first few episodes, there's something that will always be lingering in the back of your mind, making you wonder if maybe you're not that good at drag, or maybe you're not fit or cut out for Drag Race. I can't imagine that isn't a thought. And so, coming into an All-Stars adjacent season, you gotta wonder, am I doing well enough for this? Am I cut out to be here? And maybe that is why her face is always screaming that she's terrified. It may be the way that Ivory paints, or maybe it is just the fact that she is genuinely pooping her pants to be there, but she always looks like she's being chased by a killer in a horror film. And I think what Ivory brought up is the ultimate problem with this season. The Philippines queens are divas that made it so far in the original season, and all the international divas are early outs. Siam, comparatively to the others, had maybe the longest run in her season, but her run was wretched. It seems to me that a lot of these international queens are here for a redemption of sorts. To prove that their drag has stepped up, that they can actually compete, that whatever their original narrative was is not true of them now, as we often see with queens that come back that went home really early. See Kahana in All-Stars 8, or James Mansfield in All-Stars 8. They needed to prove that they were better than their last moment. And so they come in with a force and a fire, but sometimes that distracts them from breaking into a top placement. Compare them with queens like Jimbo and Candy, who already made it all the way to the end and are coming back not really concerned because they know how to play the game. They know what Rue especially wants, and they play that game decently well. And that's the Filipina queens this season. They're just ready to take the crown they all thought they objectively deserved, where the international queens are trying to just prove that they should not have gone home the first time. And the energy between these groups is noticeably different and is absolutely a disadvantage to the non-native Philippines queens. In unrelated news from Crazy Town, USA, I seem to be the the only outlier that did not think that Siam should have been top 2 last week, I actually watched Thailand 3, where a lot of people didn't. I liked who Siam was in that season, but I don't like what she's presenting now. It's very similar to me as to what Latrice did or Ms. Cracker did on their respective All-Star seasons, or even Bag of Chips or Mo Hart in Versus the World. They came back so different than the time we saw them before. I don't know how to process that information. I liked them their first time that they were on the show, but when they came back, it was like, who is this queen? I don't know who you are. Is this an edit that you're getting that's making me not respond well to you? Or is this who your true self is, and you just let your guards down a little more now that you know how all of this television works? Or are you putting on something new now to change your original narrative? I still thoroughly disagree with Siam's top placement, but it's not because I just dislike the girl. I don't like the personality that she's putting on for TV because it's reading as duplicitous to me from what I originally saw of her and originally liked. And I also stand firm that I think last week should have been Arizona and Kiana. To me, this week was a Lanesha Sparks moment, where Lanesha rightfully deserved the design challenge win, so in episode 2 they gave her this random win in that lip sync episode when that probably should have gone to Coco. And I'll say it now, I thought that Suki rightfully deserved the win. And I'm sure that last week they did not want it to be 2 Filipina queens in the top 2, maybe because of the optics, that it would appear that the competition wasn't fair to anyone non-Filipina. And I think that it would have been a totally justified top 2 last week of Kiana and Arizona, plus the good storyline. And then this week, you could reward one of the international queens. Set it up very early that it's these hard hitters that are native to this franchise, and then these queens that are coming in from the outside that are very clearly the underdogs, and one of them is rising up to the top. But maybe Suki's not on the vision board to go to the end. I don't really know. I feel like she was absolutely robbed of a win this week. Last week, my concern with Suki was that she just seemed off. Something was not quite connecting with her energy. She seemed disconnected from the competition, like she was not really jazzed to be there. That could have been jet lag, that could have been just tiredness of the production day, that could have been just being in a room with huge personalities. But this week she was on, she was present, and she was locked the fuck in. But the edit is almost blind to Suki's presence in this competition. Maybe her story isn't compelling enough to give it a proper edit, or maybe she's just not giving anything to the camera. I think she rightfully deserved top 2 this week. The episode opens with Siam revealing that she opted to save Madame Yoko because she wanted to prove her loyalty to her as a friend, as someone that she just met, that she had a good connection with, and now she's willing to have a relationship with some, however that is going to look. I respect her decision. The room seemed to respect this decision. This is a game, and you need friends to play a game, as some said. I'm gonna be hateful for a moment. I wish that Kiana had saved Yoko, because Some was kind of a sour spot this week, and I'm really not loving this girl's energy. To me, Some was acting bratty this week, and her edit was very clearly the delusional girl edit. They show her very confidently pushing that she thinks she's doing well, that she's killing it, and then they cut to someone else making snide comments, saying that she's not doing a good job, cutting looks. And then it cuts back to her smiling and having a good time. So it makes us as the audience think, is this girl crazy? This edit is typically reserved for Jans. There are contestants throughout Drag Race history that we are meant to think, oh, they don't know what they look or sound like. And so we kind of feel bad for them and kind of hope they go home because they're delulu. And especially with Some being a little hostile towards some of the other contestants, specifically Yuhua, we don't want her to be around. We already perceive as an audience that she should have gone home last week. And I always feel bad when girls get that edit, especially because they leave specific things out of the edit to paint our perception on what's going on. Specifically in this moment where Some is talking to Yuhua about how often they had to change the choreography. That was a he said, she said moment. We never see Yuhua bring up in the workroom, I thought it was sloppy that we had to change our choreography so many times. It seemed messy and unfocused, and I feel like Some was the problem here. I was speaking up for the group, and we had a lot of problems. Instead, the edit only shows us Some as the aggressor saying, you were messing up way too much, we had to keep changing things. And Yuhua, disarmed, is just trying to put her face on and is like, wait, I'm the problem? Why am I the problem? I didn't do anything. And so we get this version of the story where Some is hostile towards Yuhua. Again, bolstering that we're not supposed to like her and we want her to go home. And this continues to paint Something Wong as someone who is less stable in the competition and makes us further doubt that she should even be here this week. And I think that is meant to help us process that she's going home. But it still makes me feel bad that she got that edit at all. And then when Pao ultimately asks the question, who's dragging the group down? I want details. That's the ultimate nail in the coffin for some going home. The mini challenge this week was absurd, but nonetheless chaotically fun to watch. Yuhua threatening to call human resources over the name being so lewd and raunchy. Cock ho nuts. Was everything I needed and more. Miss Girl is a soundbite machine, and I constantly find myself enjoying the lunacy that she spouts out. And the Maxi challenge is to embrace their K-pop fantasies and form girl groups. It was a mid-tempo song that I didn't find terribly catchy, but I also didn't think it was bad either. I was hoping for a papa fate or even a sip sip sip, and it just wasn't that. As the winner of the mini challenge, Kiana is able to choose the groups. And last week, where she was really hospitable towards the international queens, this week she showed that that hospitality only goes so far by making sure that she pulls all the heavy hitters into one team, the girls that she identifies with and are friends with, and then leaves the other girls to the dust. I feel like this could have been episode 1's challenge. It would have allowed everybody to be there, including Madam Yoko. In Thailand 3, they did this as well. They eliminated Sriracha hot sauce, and then the very next week they do the girl group. Sriracha is the only one who's not present. I don't like that. There's no challenge that's going to be perfect and is going to include all the girls, but I feel like a girl group is the one that lets us as the audience know who these girls are. It lets them show their true personalities, and as a performance challenge, that's always a way to start out the season at a really high mark. And so I would have loved if this was week 1. We get to see all the girls perform. Maxi could have still been there, and then this week could have been Miss Shutika, because I don't think that necessarily requires 12 contestants. The other benefit in this scenario is that with 12 queens, the Filipina team is going to include one international girl. So that could set up very early who the queens, or Kiana in particular, are expecting to be the heavy hitters. Maybe the one that can keep up with them. How long will they keep up? Maybe it even starts to drive a wedge between this very clear divide in the workroom of the Filipina queens and the international queens. And this season is doing it like nobody else has done before, in my opinion. In UK versus the World Season 1, Baga and Blue kind of locked in with each other and left Cheryl to the dust. And they pushed their way to the end, even if it was by Rue's help. In Canada versus the World Season 1, Isis is playing super fair, and the Canada girls drop off like flies in the beginning of the season. Then in Canada versus the World Season 2, Lemon is playing the game as strategically and fairly as possible. Doesn't really consider the other girls as a part of her alliance. And in UK versus the World Season 2, Tia is playing the game exactly the same. Those UK girls drop off. This version of the Versus the World series is showing us something that none of the other franchises have done. The home country is locking in tight. I wonder how long that harmony will last for. Kiana chooses to unite Team Filipina, leaving the world on the side. This continues my concern that the Filipina queens are at a significantly higher advantage than everybody else that's here. They're united by culture and language, shared group experiences with this particular production team, whereas the others are united by the fact that they can all sign their name with the words RuPaul's Drag Race star next to it. The difference between these teams was night and day, not only from the rehearsal side, but also to the final product. And I was a smidge confused, just a smidge, as to why the international queens took us on a journey through culinary cuisine as their cohesive lyrical thought. From Siam talking about Thailand having sticky rice and mango and pad thai, Ivory serving us some milk tea, Yuhua talking about being raised by rice, and some saying that she's serving Asian food and takeaway. I get that Asian A talked about extra rice and umami, and that was in the lyrics. But the Filipina queens took time to talk about themselves, about their journeys, about what they're bringing and their competitive side, as well as their identities and branding. Ding ding. Not just to loosely talk about food. Suki had maybe the best incorporation of that food theme by simply saying, "Taste my true north flavor." It's a non-clunky way of following the food theme without directly saying, "In Canada, we have Tim Hortons, eh?" the Moose people are gonna hate me. Well, Kitty Space did not mention a single thing about food in her lyrics, which I loved. And again, I'm confused why Team International took us to the buffet rather than have an opportunity to share who they are as people and as contestants and what they're bringing uniquely to this series. So let's dive deeper into these. I love the cohesiveness of Team International in purple and pink. It does make me wonder, were they asked to bring a purple and pink performance look and an orange and yellow performance look, and then they could just mix and match what they needed to once they actually got in the challenge? Because there's no way that all of them just so happen to have these tailored, very specifically made dance costumes in these exact color palettes. Unless they did, in which case that's a setup. I imagine that they had both color prompts just in case. These are the things I think about. And each of these looks were so stylized, I can't imagine that the costuming department made them on the fly. Siam is first in a fascinating silhouette, I will say. I didn't live for the rosette breasts. I thought those were a little distracting and lacked point of view. But I guess without them, this costume would have lacked a lot of shape. So maybe if it was sculpted like those armor pieces where it actually has the breast built into it, that would have been a little more interesting. Of all of them, I disliked her hair the most, which is a weird critique. But she reminded me of the girl in the J-Idol groups who's the rapper, but then forgets how to rap in her song and just talks things through it. I did enjoy her saying hi in 3 different languages. I thought that was creative. But overall, I found the lyrics kind of a waste of time, talking just about foods that she brings from Thailand. Where are the foods? All I saw was a pepper. Because in Sip Sip Sip, she talked about how in her journey of drag, people told her that she wasn't good enough for just being pretty. But it's okay because you can just be you. No one else can be you. They were hollow and shallow lyrics, but at least it revealed a little more about who she is, that she's someone who's been doubted, but she still loves herself no matter what. This lacked that odd non sequitur charm from Sip Sip Sip. And later on the runway, she had a fun concept, but I feel like it covered way too much of her face. I think it was another missed opportunity, this one specifically for emoting. However, I hated those rhinestone clown lips, so maybe it's okay that half of her face was covered by these lotus petals. Suki was second and literally made me gasp. When she did that backbend and the 2 girls were holding her, I don't know why that was so impressive to me, but that was it. I was clutching my seat and losing my shit. Her lines were interesting, but I especially liked her incorporating the Canada's Drag Race branding of True North. I would have loved if Strong and Fierce was in there somewhere, but I understand it probably just didn't work with the lyrics. Her outfit to me was maybe the most interesting of the group. I loved that structured corset that almost looked like an exoskeleton on top of that rhinestone bodysuit. It was a complete slay. And then on the runway, this girl knocked me out. She has the audacity to come and stunt on every single one of these girls. This was what I wanted to see from Suki week 1. And I feel like she delivered on what I expect from Suki doll. This clamshell shaped garment with all of the accoutrements, the flowing white organza, it was also luxe. And the styling choice of pairing this with custom leggings, bejeweled within an inch of their life, I think was also a really smart choice. This was a gasp moment for me, and I thoroughly think that Suki deserved top 2 for this look and the performance. I just finished watching Drag Race Italia Season 2 from a weekly podcast, so please excuse this reference. Ivory looked like if La Petite Noire gave a makeover to Electro Bionic. The styling choice of this widespread fishnet, paired with this particular bodysuit, did not tickle my brain fiercely, and I think this costume in general looked heavy and cumbersome, and that's not something I should think of with a dance costume, and I think it had a lot to do with the styling up here. There was a really thick black studded collar for some reason, and this cropped sheer hoodie moment I don't think was necessary on the costume. Stylistically, it was all over the place and it just didn't mesh. Unlike her runway, which I thought was kind of an odd serve. I love this funky dress pattern with the black solids. The color blocking was great on this garment. And I thought the striped leggings were also really interesting in an odd way. I think the mix of patterns was fun and inventive, certainly an interesting take on this prompt, if not a little simple overall in concept and execution. I guess in comparison to everyone else who just really went for it, she looked to me like if Tim Burton did a vintage dress collection. We have a hummingbird outside. Oh, got distracted really just now. I liked her line about fainting on Down Under and then rising up like a phoenix. It's a little cliche perhaps, and I don't know if she's necessarily shown that phoenix energy yet. My problem with Ivory's energy right now is she is giving that scared little small puppy that shakes in a corner when strangers come over and then pees on the ground. She is coming across so reserved and frightened to be there. That may be a result of her energy and feeling like she doesn't belong based on her low placement in Down Under. That could be the way that she paints, where her eyebrows are up here and so her face just looks sad. I wish that she could break out a bit from her nerves and emerge next week. Yuhua had some really fun energy and a fairly decent look. I don't think I can ethically repeat any of her lyrics, which I think is an important part about a girl group number. You want to write something and sing something that others can hum along with you. Fans love to sing, even if ironically, I'm Roxy Andrews and I'm here to make it clear. I know you love me, baby, that's why you brought me here. Or Release the Beast, Bimini. We love these lines because they're fun and iconic. We could repeat them. I don't think that people will be quoting Yuhua's lines. Maybe there will be people out there who are doing it who are not Asian, but I don't think it's ethical that any of the rest of us should do that. I don't know if I'm allowed to comment on this. I feel like this is gonna get me in trouble. I'm gonna move away from this. And I found her runway to be terribly confusing. She said that this was not her original runway prompt in concept. I love when the judges ask about these things. Was this your original thought, or did you want to do something else? Because really, whatever they wanted to do, I guess doesn't matter in the long run because it's what they show on the main stage that is what they presented. The mix of colors and shapes were giving my eyes a stroke. I don't even want to look at it. It was kind of awful. And then Kitty Space had maybe my least favorite look in the challenge, but I am overall glad that she took the time to speak about herself rather than do this strange intersection of where drag meets food. And then her carnival freak show look was probably one of my favorites in this runway. I love the colors and the makeup and the multiple eyes that she drew on. That is true artistry right there. And then some, I'm not gonna lie, had my favorite look in the girl group. It's a shame that her energy was so rancid this week in rehearsal and in the challenge and on the runway, because this look was exactly what I wanted to see from girl group challenges. Her waist was non-existent. How was the bitch breathing? The proportions were just right with the drape of that collar as well as the fringe on the skirt. Even the semi-opaque gloves was such a brilliant stylistic choice. I maybe would have changed the hair a little bit. I think they're called Bantu knots. I think that I would have maybe shed that because that is something that I think is maybe a little appropriative. That's a conversation for someone with maybe a little more expertise in the area. Just something to think about. On the runway, I guess I understand what she was trying to do, but the costume jewelry on top of this crushed velvet was giving those mannequins on those little booths that they have outside of the mall stores that are trying to sell you cheap costume jewelry that are complete knockoffs of something that you would find in one of the actual shops. And the headpiece was a little, come on Teletubby, teleport us to Mars. And while I love the movement of this look, I wish that it wasn't so flat. Then Team Philippines stuns in orange and yellow. Their choreography was smooth and well rehearsed. Brigading opens up with some great callback lines, shining like a star, incorporating pop off into it, which I loved. I liked her performance a lot. My only real problem was that I thought that her outfit looked more like lingerie than a performance look. That's such a small nitpick, but at the end of the day, these small nitpicks are exactly what I think the judges are looking for and how I personally would judge who's top two and who's in the bottom. And on the runway, I really enjoyed what she was going for with this crushed crystal effect on this dripping gold. I think the asymmetry didn't please my eyes terribly. Bernie looked the cutest in her group. I love this take on a butterfly, which also translated into her runway garment. Mind of a mastermind. Maybe completely unplanned, but brilliant. However, I worry that that runway looked a little more like feathers than butterflies, and I think that has a lot to do with how washed out the lighting is on this stage. And I wish that they could figure out how to adjust their white balance just a little bit in the other direction. Her Minnie Mouse bow hair was super cute in the challenge. I loved her energy. I guess I understand why Venus named her as the one that was the lowest in the group conceptually. Maybe she didn't have the most bombastic messaging, but I also think that critique could have gone to Arizona. I know that I'm gonna get flack for this, because I disliked Arizona's Madonna by way of Brita Filter's hair. I looked at it and all I saw was, God bless the gays, God bless the children. Drag Race brain rot. The costume was not my favorite either, and a line about vaping? Oh girl. And then on the runway, I was very impressed by the mechanics of this corset. I think the red popped really well. I will say I'm a bit tired of these sculptural wigs that come up into almost a feather shape. Let's get rid of those. And then Kiana made my back hurt when she jumped up and fell onto it. Her poor tailbone. Is this stage made of foam or something? Because I felt a disc dislocate just watching her do that move. I think her look and her lyrics were very on par for what I expect for these challenges. I wish that she had a different hair from her entrance look, but that's neither here nor there. Where she made her mark was for me on the runway. I loved this look and how foresty and ethereal it was. And Venus is last in the group, doing some of my favorite lines. She brings up some throwbacks to her original season, talking about airtime, which she said a lot in Philippines 1. Grab your popcorn for the gravity inside the popcorn, of course. I thought her vocals were the cleanest and the most polished of everyone here. This challenge was clearly in her wheelhouse and she seemed to be having a great time with it. Not only that, but she also did the most Caucasian twerking that could have ever happened in the human history of Caucasian twerking, and then Swiffered the floor with her puss. It was camp, it was insane. I hope this crazy woman never changes. Her runway was extremely campy, being the net that's catching all the fish. I love how all of those had movement. I need to know how that worked. Were they all battery operated, or was there one string of wire that was going into all of them? In any case, Venus does camp in a way that nobody else does. With all of this in mind, taking the challenge and the runway into consideration, my top 2 were Suki and Venus. And then I think Kiana was really high for that runway. And then I think the very clear and distinct bottoms were Ivory, Sum, and Yuhua. And I mentioned at the top of this review that Mama Pao always manages to get her dig in. She asked the girls to air out their grievances on the main stage, which is so messy. And this question was clearly to poke more holes in Something's already sinking boat. And I think this is to continue further this narrative that the Filipina queens are very harmonious in their approach to this competition, and the international girls are simply not prepared to be here. Venus is the only one of the Filipina queens who gives the answer that Pao wants. When she did a repeat of her okay and looked so bored by the other two, like, that's not what I want. I want drama. I love that Venus figured out that's what she wanted, mostly obfuscated that Bernie was the weakest of the group, but not that she was even that bad or that weak. And then immediately brings up in Untucked that she named her, but that she didn't really mean it. And I kind of disagreed that Bernie was the weakest. I still think it was Arizona. Venus and Arizona are called as the top 2 this week, and they must decide between Sum and Ivory to go home. In Untucked, Sum gives the most wishy-washy, you can keep me or you can eliminate me. You can keep someone who wants to be here, or you can eliminate someone who you think is great competition. It's your choice, whatever you want to do. You can keep someone who's gonna slay, or you can eliminate someone you think will suck next week. But again, it's your choice. You can do whatever you want, just choose someone to stay. What kind of fight for your life was that? I don't know, I still think that Sum should have gone home last week. I think that Madame Yoko would have been fine this week. The lip sync song is XL, and Venus just looked so happy to be here. She made a few odd choices, but nothing that made me scratch my head too much. She wins and chooses to eliminate Something. For a very specific reason, she says while grabbing the lipstick that she is feeling some kind of way and she wants to just set her free, but then doesn't really air that out on the stage to her face, and I wish she had. Sum realistically was not bringing the best energy to this cast, whether that was just what we saw in the edit or if it was worse in real time. Her presence in this competition has been a sour spot, and it's been brought up by others and it's been brought up by me in other conversations. I kind of wish that we had River Medway here instead of Something. I feel like when I think of queens from the UK that slay, River is the one. Next week is a design challenge where I think Suki's got this in the bag, and I think that Venus is gonna do good, but I also think that Yuhua is gonna do great because she's a costumer, no? I'm kind of hoping that we will get no improv acting or snatch games this season. I would love if this is the season that does not include a snatch game, because comedy is already really hard to make, but then when you've got people that come from different backgrounds, different perspectives on what's funny, different cultural identities, and different comprehension of the English language, I think it's gonna get really messy and the reference points are not gonna connect. But that's just my concern for a future challenge. What did you think about this episode? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, hit that like button, and I will see y'all next week for another one. See y'all on the flip.